Hello friends, welcome to SKD Learning. Today we will talk about software requirements testing. Why test requirements? Well, requirements are what makes a software or anything else. And requirements phase is the most important phase of software development lifecycle. Would you like to see your house constructed without a proper drainage system? No, right? Just because not much emphasis was given to the drainage system while gathering requirements for the house can affect the overall quality of the house. Similarly, when building software, we should emphasize at most on the requirements phase because this is the most critical phase of SDLC. Any missed or overlooked software requirement can affect the overall quality of the software like a house. Ultimately, we will end up reinvesting our time and money in fixing those overlooked requirements. Thus, time and money savings are another strong reason why we should test requirements at the very beginning, which would ultimately result in enhanced software quality. Now let's take a look at the different types of requirement errors that happen in the requirements phase. Three kinds of errors can happen based on the different error sources. These are people error, process error, and documentation error. A Science Direct journal titled Detecting Defects in Software Requirement Specification has categorized the requirement errors into these three main categories. By people error, we mean the errors made by people involved in gathering, analyzing, and documenting the requirements. Some examples of people error are miscommunication among stakeholders, lack of participation of stakeholders, lack of participation of the stakeholders who are important from the domain knowledge point of view, etc. Second is the process errors, which are caused when requirement analysis is conducted incorrectly. Some examples of process errors are errors occurred during requirement elicitation phase, analysis errors that occurred during performing the requirement analysis activity, and traceability errors caused because of incomplete requirement traceability process. And lastly, the documentation errors that occurs while writing the requirements document. Documentation errors may happen even if the author has correct understanding of the requirements and the requirement engineering process was okay. Examples of documentation error include wrong organization of information in the requirements document, not adhering to the set documentation standards, mentioning of duplicate information, typo errors, etc. Now let's take a brief look at what kind of requirement error detection techniques we can use to detect the people, process, and documentation errors. The first one is the checklist based reading. In this technique, the reviewer gets a checklist of general questions with a yes or no options. Reviewer will go through the requirements document and mark the checklist questions as yes or no as per the understanding of the content of the requirements document. This technique is good in sense that reviewer knows what things to check for according to the checklist. However, it does not provide much clarity about the how to do the inspection. Hence, experience of the reviewer becomes important here. Second technique is the defect-based technique or defect-based reading technique, where defects are classified and sets of questions were prepared for each defect class. Different reviewers are appointed for document inspection, each focusing on a specific defect class. For example, one reviewer is focusing on finding ambiguous defect type, while other reviewer is focusing on finding an incorrect defect type. This technique is good in sense that reviewer knows both the what and how part of the inspection. However, in this technique, as reviewer is more focused on a specific defect class while reviewing the documents, some generic defects that do not fall within any defect class may be missed out. The third technique is the perspective-based reading technique, in which the software requirements are reviewed from different user perspectives. For example, different people working in different roles in the organization are appointed as reviewers of the document to get the feedback in terms of unique perspective. This technique is good in sense we get input from different perspectives. However, the interrelationships between different components of the requirement document might be ignored as the reviewers might not be subject matter experts. As we see that different techniques have their own pros and cons, another technique called combined technique is advocated. In the combined reading technique, every part of the SRS document is inspected separately. This technique lets the reviewer understand the what and how of the inspection process because both the checklist based reading and defect based reading techniques are incorporated. The combined reading technique also has some drawbacks, like no clear instruction on which reviewer should focus on what part of the inspection process and lack of focus on any defect type that has not been detected previously. However, the combined reading technique is more effective than the other three techniques in that it facilitates the identification of variety of defect type such as omission defect type, ambiguous defect type, inconsistent defect type, incorrect defect type, not conforming to standards type of defect, and superfluous defects, etc. So concluding, we looked at why testing software requirements is important, what are the major categories of requirement errors that can happen, like the people, process and documentation errors, and what are the different requirement error detection techniques we can use to better trace the requirement error from the very beginning. Hope you liked the information. Thank you.